There are a lot of good benefits to drinking raw, unpasteurized milk, but there are certain circumstances where it's actually best to pasteurize it. They recommend that if you're pregnant, a young child, an old person, or immunocompromised, that you pasteurize your milk. And it's not as hard to do as you would think. So I start with my double boiler. It's just a pan that's been filled 2 inches with water. It then has an insert in it that is elevated above the water so that there's no direct heat exchange there. If you don't have a double boiler, you can actually make one pretty easily. Go ahead and take a look at the link in the description below. So then I just pour my milk in the top. Now, right now I'm doing about a quart's worth. You don't want to do any more than a gallon at a time. Currently, my milk temperature, since it just came out of the refrigerator, is only 40 degrees. So I need to get this up to either one of 2 temperatures. I either need to get it up to 150 for 30 minutes or 162 for 15 seconds. I go for the 162. While the milk is heating, I'm gonna place my lid and my bottle that I'm going to use into hot water and get it to come to a nice boil on the stove. I need to make sure that there's no air pockets in the jar itself. This is me sanitizing the jar, so there's no cross-contamination once I put it in it. I use a stainless steel utensil to stir this. You really don't want to use wood because it can harbor bacteria inside it. Pretty much when it comes to milk, you kind of want to stick to stainless steel everything. In order to sanitize my jar, I need to get the water up to a boil for 10 minutes if I'm at sea level. Since I'm at 1,200 feet, I actually adjust it for altitude, and it has to be there for 15 minutes. So it's a good thing to do while I'm waiting for everything else to come up to temperature. That's somewhat of an optional step, just kind of depending on your situation. If I knew that somebody was neutropenic, had issues with their immune system, then I would go ahead and sterilize the jar. Otherwise, I think if it's clean out of the dishwasher, you should be fine. I continue to stir kind of regularly just to make sure that the temperature change goes throughout the whole thing. When I set my thermometer probe off to the side, I make sure that the tip doesn't touch anything. So I'm already up to 150 degrees, and it took less than 15 minutes to get here. At this point, I could go for half an hour, but I'm not going to. I'd rather the increased temperature, which it actually gets to fairly quickly, than having to wait so long. Okay, so now I'm at 162 degrees. That did not take long at all. So I just have to keep it here for 15 seconds. I'm going to actually turn off my heat because it's continuing to climb. The big thing is you don't want to bring this to a boil or even a near boil, because if you do, then it ends up with a cooked taste to it. Now I'm going to remove my milk from the double boiler. My favorite way to do this is place it on a baking sheet and then surround it in ice. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to elevate it on top of the ice that's melting, especially if you have it a little full. So that's the other thing I recommend. Don't fill it to capacity. Then I'll place my ice in my tray and I'll kind of stack it up against my milk. If at any point during your time, like if you were to do 150, it drops below 150, then you have to get it back up to 150 and hold that temperature or higher for that full 30 minutes. Again, you'd have to restart your timer. That's one reason I like the 162 so much. 15 seconds is a very easy amount of time to keep something at or above a certain temperature. As the ice begins to melt, I just keep pressing it up against my double boiler. And I'll continue to stir it to encourage it to cool down at the same rate. My goal is to get it down to 68 degrees relatively quickly. I'm already down to 126. It should go fast. This just makes it so that it goes through that phase where it's the right temperature for bacteria to grow in really fast. We don't want any kind of bacteria hot tub going on, so. The times when you know the conditions that the milk was milked in, whether it be the dairy or the person individually, then you can know if you can trust it or not. But a lot of times you don't actually know the conditions of what's happening with your milk. For me, I do all of the processing of my milk, so I know that I can drink it raw. But that might not be your situation. With the milk down to 68 degrees, I'm going to put this off to the side, and I have just a few more minutes on my jar, so I'm gonna let that finish, and the milk will continue to cool. In addition to boiling the jar and the lid, I also boiled my funnel so that if it goes through that, it's all sterilized, and I used a wooden spoon to put across my tongue so that the end of my tongue is nice and hot and sterilized, but this side isn't too hot because I have to be able to reach in there somehow. So then I'll take out my lid, being very careful not to put it upside down. I'll take out my jar. Now these jars are actually super nice. I can touch the outside of the jar all that I want, but I can't touch the inside of it because that's of course where the milk is going. And it's very hot, so I have to be careful. Then I can pull out my stainless steel funnel and place it directly on the jar. Now I do need to wait for that jar to come down in temperature just a little bit. Our milk's doing okay over there. It's still in the ice. It's nice and cold. It's getting colder. I want to get it down to 40 degrees in the refrigerator, but it's okay for me to take just a little bit of time to let that jar cool down so that I don't end up breaking my jar. With my jar comfortable to touch, I feel comfortable pouring my milk into it. It's continued to decrease in temperature. It's about 50 degrees right now. And so I'll go ahead and pour it in my jar. You want to try and be careful not to get any of that ice water into your jar because of course that's not sterilized. And then I'll pick this up, being sure I only touched the outside. Place it on and put that in the refrigerator where it can really quickly get down to below 40 degrees. And then I have perfectly pasteurized milk that is ready to be consumed. This method of pasteurization will be good for any kind of milk, whether it be cow, goat, sheep, or what have you, and it should be consumed within the next 2 weeks. It does not homogenize the milk. After 24 hours, you should begin to see some separation between the cream and the milk again, unless it's homogenized naturally like goat milk is.